I want to highlight the harshness to the point of just absurdity of the January 6th prosecutions. By the way, there is word now that the DOJ may be indicting a whole bunch of new people. They've indicted about 1,000. They say they might have another 1,000. I mean, this would be a little bit strange that here we are in 2023, 2.25 years past January 6, 2021, and you're identifying new defendants now? This is a little bit, but it shows you they're out to cast the widest of wide nets. And when you look at the two cases that I'm focusing on, you just see how petty and arbitrary and even outlandish their approach is. So my first exhibit involves a January 6th defendant who is now accused of violating his travel conditions by going to CPAC. Now, let's look at this. The guy is, his name is Gabriel Garcia. He is facing 6 charges, including 2 felonies, and he lives in South Florida. And as sometimes happens when you are under indictment awaiting trial, and you are not confined but allowed to go home, your travel is restricted, which means that you need to get permission when you travel. Now, all of this is a little bit eerily familiar to me because I was under similar restrictions. I had a probation officer, and typically if I wanted to travel to give a speech, for example, I would have to get clearance and get permission. I have to tell him why I'm going, and if I said, well, it's part of the way I make my living, I could get permission to do it. Well, now, this guy, Gabriel Garcia, sought permission from the court. He said, I need to travel to Washington, D.C. to do 2 things. One, I want to observe the January 6th trials, which are going on with the Proud Boys. And the other is I want to consult with my own defense counsel in D.C. pending my own trial. And these are perfectly legitimate reasons for wanting to go to Washington, D.C., and this permission was in fact granted. But now, according to the DOJ, this fellow Gabriel Garcia violated his travel conditions. Why? Because according to the government in a court filing, they say that he did go to the Proud Boys trial for a few hours on March 3rd, but he spent the rest of the day at CPAC, which was occurring across the river in suburban Maryland. And the court filing has some social media posts which show Garcia socializing at CPAC. And Garcia's point is, and I think here Garcia is right, so? In other words, Garcia said, I want permission to go to Washington, D.C. to do 2 things. I want to meet with my attorney, and he did. And I want to attend the Proud Boys trial, and he did. And then, while he was in D.C., he went, I guess, for several hours to CPAC. Now, there's absolutely nothing that I'm aware of in these travel restrictions that says that if you do the things that you said you were going to do, you can't go out to lunch, meet with friends, go to CPAC, do whatever the heck you want to do. You are a free person. Obviously, you need permission to make the trip, and he had legitimate reasons for doing it, and he carried out those legitimate reasons. In my case, for example, I was given permission. I was actually let out of the confinement center to go to a hearing in New York, and when I went to the hearing, which would be typically in the morning, I would then go that evening over to Fox News and appear on the Megyn Kelly show. So what is the prosecution going to say? Well, he's violating the terms of his, he's being let out of confinement to go to his hearing. What's he doing on the Megyn Kelly show? The answer is it's none of your business. So in other words, it is not the case. This guy has not been convicted of anything. He has trials coming up. He's operating under limited release conditions. He's satisfying those release conditions, and yet they're trying to now somehow act like there's some kind of violation. Frankly, I can see none. And I don't think this is likely to go anywhere unless the judge is just a complete jackass, which is, of course, not entirely outside the realm of probability. The other outrageous case, and I'll maybe talk in more detail about this separately, is this guy, Doug Mackey, who is accused of putting out anti-Hillary memes. Now, strictly speaking, this is not a January 6th case. This is a DOJ case, but this guy put out a meme and it was a joke. And the joke was, hey, listen, guys, when you vote for Hillary, this was in 2016, vote by phone. Now, there's obviously no way to vote by phone. This was an obvious joke. And by the way, the left makes this kind of joke all the time. There's a kind of old joke about, hey, listen, tell people of the opposing party to make sure they show up to vote on Wednesday. Of course, election day is on Tuesday. And so this joke has been around for at least a couple of decades. In any event, who gets prosecuted for putting out memes? Well, apparently the answer is Doug Mackey. The DOJ is accusing him of, quote, violating the Ku Klux Klan Act. Now, the Ku Klux Klan Act goes back decades, and it was kind of an act that basically said that it was to prevent Klansmen from terrorizing Black Americans into not voting, intimidating them from voting. Well, this guy isn't doing that. In fact, the DOJ hasn't been able to produce one single person who was who says, hey, listen, I was thinking of voting, but I saw this guy's memes and I tried to vote by phone and then I didn't vote. So in other words, they can't produce a single so-called victim of this stunt. I mean, have we reached a point in America where you can't even do memes and jokes and quips? Because if you do, you're going to be prosecuted for it?